All right, everybody, welcome to Are They Out There? Tonight is a very, very special program. I want to give a very special welcome to Melchizedek. Thank you for joining us and honoring us. I also want to welcome our two contestants that follow us on TikTok and YouTube, Diana and Paul. Welcome to the show. Again, everybody out there, I mean, this is real. We really do these contests and everything. So, again, anybody that wants to get a hold of us, you can email us at arethayouthere1 @gmail.com. We want to hear from you, stories. Tell us anything that you'd like to hear us look into. And again, keep your coming in with the TikToks because I got that paranormal investigation coming up here very soon. And I think that's going to be very interesting for a couple of contestants as well that will be joining me. And with that said, Stuart, this is your show to take over, brother.
I love to hear it. I love to hear it. So I have known my friend for a very, very long time. We actually met at the hospital, and gosh, it would have been 2006. It's been a number of years. You know, we're coming up on 20 years of knowing each other, and I've watched his spiritual journey. I've watched him kind of just go through a ton of things, whether it's like dealing with the hectic. The horrors of combat to basically kind of finding himself, whatnot. And he's had this really great spiritual growth. And I really just feel like I want to kind of present him to the world so that he can kind of tell his thing. You know what I mean? Like it's a wild and crazy tale, but I really believe that a number of people could possibly benefit from it.
Awesome. And before we start, I want to say this too, because I know that Melchizedek, you went live on TikTok. So I want to welcome all of your followers that are watching and listening to you on TikTok right now. Thank you for joining us as well. And take it away.
Oh, it's on me.
It's on you, brother. It's all you now.
George. So George, tell everybody sure. I'm good.
No.
Tell everybody what you did. Where did this all start? It started
I think that what makes this really interesting is that, as you know, Stu, it wasn't me trying to find spirit. It was me trying to figure out if they used a frequency weapon on us in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of where I got stuck on at first. And, there was this strange event that happened before the Battle of Al Nahaf. And as we moved up in the first wave in 2003, there were 4 days missing.
Mm-hmm.
Just 4 days went missing. And we all kind of assumed that, the reason why the days went missing was because we had, just documented the days wrong. But after the Battle of Al Nahaf, our wristwatches stopped keeping time.
Mm-hmm.
So all of our wristwatches they would be hours off. We'd reset them to our pluggers, and they'd be off by hours again just a few hours later.
Well, and so this is during the time that also like you guys were like pushing hard too.
Pushing hard.
Were, like, going. Like you guys were like falling asleep, or you're basically like people would like almost bump into the other vehicle. They're like, whoa, oh,
I don't recall. What was your unit?
3rd of 327, 101st
Okay.
Airborne.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, not to interrupt, but I mean, if we're going to give something away, I know that Melchizedek is a private person in a sense. So if there's something that you don't want to have said or whatever, don't want to answer, feel free not to answer. And very respectful of
privacy,
what you want, what you don't want in your privacy. Absolutely. So just keep that in mind. So.
And I'm sorry, George. So you guys were like you guys were missing time. Like you guys' watches stopped.
Well, what was interesting about that is that 10 years after that, we had kind of just blown that off to being extreme stresses of lack of sleep. But I was talking to my friend, and he was in the other battalion on the other side of Al Nahaf, and they also had all their watches stop working. And when I started to try to investigate, okay, what would cause watches to go off? And we had, metal watches, and the digital watches seemed to be okay, but all the metal watches seemed to have been off. And I started doing more research into frequency weapons and the idea of using microwave radiation and other frequencies to amplify brain activity. And maybe they were using those on the crowds around us to get them to not, uprise or act crazy because we're invading their country, right? These are just theories that I was throwing around in my mind. And I started to learn about frequencies that affect the brains. And I was like, well, what if I expose myself to these frequencies? Will there be an effect to it? And I exposed myself to gamma frequency at 40 hertz, and there was an effect on my brain. And I kind of stepped back from the table for a second, and I decided to try to go at it with a spiritual protection in a way. So I thought I would use some sort of ancient ritual to go along with the frequency meditation. And I went and purchased the Book of Enoch as my source, because I was trying to figure out what was the most ancient version of Christianity I could find, where I could find some sort of ritual that I could do that would keep me protected if I'm going to go and play around in these frequency realms. When I'd gotten the book, I began to read it, and that night that I got the book, I was exposing myself to those frequencies, and I was in what I thought was, a deep meditation. And it felt like there was a ball in the center part of my head, and I was squishing this ball. And then I squished it down. The best way to describe would be like a hole in my mind. And as soon as I did that, I instantly went into a hallucinogenic state, like I had just taken a bunch of mushrooms or acid. Like I felt like this pop in the center part of my brain. And I literally stood up from the desk that I was standing at, and I was like, "Oh, what did I just do? I thought I broke my brain or something, that I had given myself a seizure, or I was about to, lose consciousness or something." But I rode with it. I sat back down and kind of went into a meditative state, and I started to experience very intense spiritual visions, and then all of a sudden, it felt like somebody plugged an internet cord into the back of my head, and I just started getting all of these visions rapidly fast, to the point where I couldn't even understand what was happening. And I fell down to my knees because it was so strong, and I started whimpering and crying because of the images that I was seeing were so strong and powerful. And I had woken up the next morning, and I went to my brother's house, and I couldn't wear any clothes in a sense, so I covered myself in these blankets. And I went to my brother's house, and I started telling him that I think I met God. And for 7 days after that, I went through these like intense visions. And at one point in time, this being brought me in front of the computer and made me like watch all these videos of all these animals being killed and all of these horrific scenes. And it was all about our earth turning on itself and seeing massive extinctions of these animals, and these massive death of all these fish being put on the shore, and it was like he was making me watch all these videos and click through it and see it all with my own eyes of what this earth was doing. And after the episode, I had lost a lot of my military like consciousness, my thought process, that pride in your military unit and so forth. It was like somebody had ripped the programming right out of my mind, and I could see better than I did before the event. I could see myself better. I could understand things at a much higher level than I did before. And of course, when I went to try to understand what this was, I constantly was exposed to a manic episode or a bipolar manic episode. which I took it and put it in the back of my pocket. I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because when I was in Iraq, I had heard a voice in the Battle of Al Nahaf, and then I heard a voice again in Baghdad, and then I heard a voice again in Mosul, and I was like, oh, well, maybe this is what's going on. Uh, uh, but I end up spending that time period uh, uh, going to school. So I spent 10 years going to college, trying to figure out what had happened. And I had focused a lot of my classes on sociology and psychology. And I did about a little bit in physics of light and a bunch of classes in the history of civilization and so forth, just to kind of compare what I had saw in my visions to what I was seeing in the actual texts, in actual studies that people were looking at. And I realized that what had happened to me did not actually directly correlate to what happens to somebody with a bipolar or manic episode. Because usually these episodes are damaging in the sense the psyche. Usually people don't get smarter as they go through these episodes. Fast forward 10 years or almost 10 years, I was told specific things as I was left on that first episode, which was go into the city, you will find a woman, there you will have a divine child, right? And I was single at the time, and I completely thought this was just, a vision. But I did do that, and I did get married, and I did have a child. And after I had that child, I had a second episode. And this is kind of rare for a bipolar to even have a second manic episode. And this episode was directly correlated to Stu giving me a sword, which was also one of the things that was told to me in the first episode, that I would be given a divine sword. And after receiving this sword from Stu, I instantly went into a manic episode after returning home. And these episodes, when this episode came on, I didn't have a choice. I wasn't, in a sense, trying to communicate with gods or trying to do anything spiritual. I was just trying to understand what I was seeing. And I had got another book that I was guided to, the Nabagani texts. So when I had this second episode happen, I dug into this Nabagani text and started to read it while I was going through this episode. And I realized that not only that book, but other books I could pick up while I was in that episode, and made the words come alive. So while I was reading these books, these ancient books and the Holy Bible, the words that I was reading, it was like the vibrations in the words were giving me a different understanding of what I was seeing. And it was almost like playing a record. I was seeing stuff in the Bible that was different from what everyone else was seeing, although the words were written the same, which was really weird. And I went through this episode, and at the end of it, or towards the end of it, I was asking who this was. And I said, "Who are you? You're not God. You're something else." And it tells me I'm Enki. And I kind of paused for a second, and I'm thinking, I've heard this name before. And I literally Google it on my cell phone. Go ahead. I Google it on my cell phone, and I find out it's a water god, which all of a sudden makes a huge amount of sense, because the entire time I've been going through these episodes, I'm took into water, and I'm supposed to baptize before I do any of these spiritual things. So there was already this huge connection to water in what I was dealing with anyways. So seeing this connection that he was a water god, and all of these other aspects of water which I was being exposed to, really made a lot of sense to me. I was like, well, this is kind of weird. And as I discussed more with Enki, why are you talking to me? What is going on? And the way that he explained it to me was that when the government did this temporary illusion when they did the temporary illusion on my unit to make us perform differently under this temporary illusion, which is messing with how people perceive time, right? It makes someone like me skip in front of everybody else. So everyone else that was exposed to this temporary illusion, in a way, they're set out of time. And because I'm set out of time, and there's other factors associated with it, like my genetics and literally my algorithm through life, is why Enki is talking to me. And the things that he tells me are just wildly crazy at first. But then when you start digging into these ancient texts and you start reading these Egyptian hieroglyphs and you start looking at what is being said in Sumerian texts, it makes a lot more sense. And so at this point in time, Enki leaves me with this bomb where he shows me Jesus Christ as an African, more correctly an Ethiopian. And he shows me his twin brother. And he shows me that his twin brother is the one that goes to the cross and dies. And when he leaves me with this vision, I'm like, okay, that's kind of a big vision, because it's showing Jesus Christ as an African. And it's showing that he has a twin brother. And this is how he had achieved the miracle on the cross, which is kind of hard to swallow at first. But as I kind of dealt with this for a year after that second episode, I'm trying to figure out what I'm being shown, what I'm being seen. And I'm still hearing Enki very strongly, and he's guiding me through these books, and he tells me to pick up the Quran. And I'm like, okay, let's pick up the Quran, let's do it, right? So I pick up the Quran, I open it up, and I start reading words out of the Quran, and then I'm hit with another episode. And I start digging into this Quran like I have never dug into a holy book before. And I'm reading the Quran, and all of its words are coming alive to me. And I'm seeing all of these visions, and I'm seeing Muhammad, I'm seeing him going through his struggles, I'm seeing the true birth of Jesus Christ through these visions. And I'm almost overwhelmed by it. And I'm told to go to a tree in the middle of this rainforest here in Washington. And it's towards the nighttime. And as I'm doing as Enki tells me to, I go to the tree. And as I'm coming to the tree, there's like this sounds of Indian drums. And I could feel all of these like indigenous spirits around me as I'm walking towards this tree. And I go up into the tree, and there's like this platform on this 780 something year old tree where you could sit. And so I go up into the tree and I sit. And while I'm sitting there, I get hit with these visions upon visions upon visions. And they're pretty overwhelming. And I leave the tree. The next day, I'm told to go to a mosque in Olympia. So I go to the mosque in Olympia, and there's no one in there. I go into the mosque, I sit in front of where they pray at, and I pray like a Muslim for the first time. And it was very emotional. I could feel these different spirits around me that were in a way forgiving me for things that I had held on my chest. And I left the room that they prayed in, and there was this big library. And they're called hadithas, which are secondary writings from the Quran. And I just started letting Enki guide me as I grabbed the books, and I started reading from these hadithas. And I got even a more detailed image of what the Quran was saying. And when I went back to my house after this, I cannot explain what this being was, but it was not Enki. It was more powerful, very powerful. And this being came upon me, and Enki warned me that he was coming. Enki said, you're about to meet a being that is like God, and you will think of him as God. But you must be careful in what he had said and my way I used my thought process. I had to be pure in the way I thought. I had to be pure in the way I moved. I had to be pure in everything that went through my mind. And when this being came upon me, it took me out of my house at night, and I went into the forest here in Ocean Shores, just in a blanket, and I sat by a tree, and this being came upon me. And for 3 days, I couldn't touch anything. I couldn't touch matter. If I touched matter, I would get images of where that matter came from in this crazy visual extravaganza of like where we get resources from. And it was almost too much. But I spent 3 days with this being, and it showed me things that were just mind-boggling. And
Melchizedek, was he a watcher?
no, this was a being that was very, very powerful, and it's been here since the beginning. And it did, and I don't know how to explain it, because it was different from when Enki would engage me. When Enki would engage me, I would get these feelings like I was on, mushrooms or LSD. I was like on some sort of drug, like something was getting me really high. But when this being entered the story, it was way more powerful, to the point where I couldn't even sleep. It just spoke to me 24 hours a day and showed me visions 24 hours a day. And I could realize after I was done with this powerful being why it can't communicate with us in this way. Because what I think happens is that when these beings communicate with us, it releases chemicals that are in your pineal gland, which allows your brain frequencies to tune into their consciousness so that they can actually communicate with you. But I think when you communicate with this other being, it releases so many chemicals in your brain that, if it were to stay with me for any longer, it might have killed me, because I wasn't eating or wasn't able to sleep either. So there was a physical effect to what was happening. And after I was done with this being, Enki came to me and he said, "Now these are your instructions, and I'm to go learn from the Indian." So I was like, okay, well, how am I going to meet some Indians, right? But strange enough, right? I follow the path, and I run into an Indian elder through this Baula religion, and he invites me to a bear ceremony in Oregon. And I go to this bear ceremony in Oregon, which was the most beautiful ceremony. Like, I was so amazed by what I was seeing, and I was so overwhelmed by what I was seeing that it pierced through my spirit. I was changed by that ceremony. And I even went to the doctors after the ceremony, because I thought there might have been something wrong with my kidneys or my liver, because it was this fasting, cleansing moment afterwards that was very scary at first, but now I realized it was just a part of what was happening. But after I had spent time with the Indians, I was guided to this book called The Book of John by the Mandeans. Now, what made this book so interesting, and what made this vision and knowing about this book so interesting, is that this book was not translated until 2020. Now, the Mandeans, they have been persecuted in Iraq, so it wasn't until 2020 that they finally allowed Westerners to actually translate their books. And so I was able to get this newly translated book, the Mandean Book of John, and I began to read it. And as I began to read it, it basically solidified all these other visions that I had before. And the Book of John has wording in it that is so controversial that it amazes me that nobody else has ever spoke about it. There's a verse in this book that speaks about Muhammad coming, and that he would remove all the tents and replace them with mosques. And it's interesting that this book speaks about Muhammad and speaks about Jesus in the same setting, but this book is written hundreds and hundreds of years before they even walked the earth. So being guided through this book, and reading this book and realizing that all of this stuff that has happened over these years has made me sit down and think, okay, maybe there's something more to what's going on. And as me and Stu talked, he introduced me to Gary. And when we had talked to when I had talked to Gary, I had gotten on the phone with Stu afterwards, and I was like, he thinks I'm crazy, right? And he's like, oh yeah, right. And I told Stu, I was like, it's impossible for me to actually say all this stuff in a 1 hour setting. Like it would take me as long as it took me to learn it.
Well, and also, George, it's not like you just like came up with this. This is like 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
This is 10 years. I mean, this is a decade. It's a decade
And
of following this and studying and going back and forth. And you're like, did you question your sanity?
I definitely questioned my sanity. Like I told you that first episode when I came out of my RV after dealing with it, I was like, is this what it's like to go mad? Is this the first feeling of what somebody feels like before they're on the sidewalk, dancing and holding a pizza? I was thinking this is my last bit of sanity, right?
And I have to tell you, with our conversation that we had at first, I didn't have a yellow pad out, but as you and I began to talk, I took like 6-7 pages of notes, just going through. And as we were talking, I had the laptop open. I was Googling stuff you were saying, and everything. And I talked to Stu later on, and I'm not going to call you crazy, but I was like, a lot of I think I used the word interesting a whole lot. Not going to lie, right?
Yeah,
So,
that was interesting.
So
And
they were telling me about you, and immediately I go to TikTok, and no, your videos on there are pretty intense. So I'm watching them, and I'm just like, I was like, I got a lot of questions. Like I gotta hear his side of it past the videos, because I'm like, he's gonna break out a sock puppet any moment.
Yeah.
But after
that said,
telling
Bobby,
me this much of it, like, I'm really interested.
So, Bobby, before you ask any questions, because we're the host, but we have special guests with us, if you don't mind, Melchizedek, that we open it up maybe to see if our guests have a couple questions for you. Would that be all right?
Yeah.
All right. Diana, go ahead. Do you have questions for him?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. My head is kind of spinning right now because number one, I want to say that I gotten to know Melchizedek from TikTok, and this series, it's amazing. Okay. In fact, one of my favorite series is called Outlander. Melchizedek is better than Outlander. Okay. I mean, this is like, okay, at times I kind of think, yeah, this guy's either super crazy or he's super for real. But either way, it's a great ride. And but I really feel your heart, Melchizedek. Okay. And I wanted to ask you, or like people that are crazy, they wouldn't talk like you, Melchizedek. Like you're saying, you know, I mean, that proves it right there that you're not, because you're saying, you even question yourself. But the reason why my head is spinning is that I have an identical twin sister, and we were tested because we're identical twins by the military. And this show is not about me. So, but I'm just saying, listening to you talk about it, oh my God, that happened to us, okay, for a year, a whole year. And
This wasn't in Montauk, New York, was it by chance?
no, in California.
Okay.
We're Edwards Air Force Base, but we got out alive. But who came to us? Like Jesus, it was, who, I mean, we were fired on. There were spirits. Like I said, it's a long story. But yeah, I kind of wasn't getting that, even though I love your series. I'm so glad I'm part of this, because really hearing the in-depth, story, how, wow, I mean, what they put you through they put us through different things, but like they injected us with different things. But now my sister is kind of on the schizophrenic side. So that's what I'm like. I keep wondering, why am I so like, I totally connect to your series. And Jesus has been telling me recently, I'm supposed to go to some American Indians to help my sister to get her out of the trip. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh yeah, like I had said, I said, "Oh, pass thee back to the Indian." There's a
Yeah,
lot of healing in their spiritual ceremonies that
yeah.
help you kind of find your inner strength to fight your own demons.
Like I'm gonna either be invited. There were some American Indians up in Northern California that invited us years ago to visit with them. I mean, I have a travel trailer. Jesus has been telling me to get my trailer ready. And it's intense because my sister, different things happen to her. Like I don't have eyebrows. They like lasered my eyebrows. They just did all this weird stuff. But one thing I was gonna do, as I said in intention, Melchizedek, for sure, I know you should be able to feel this, but as I put this up, this is the presence of God, that is coming through me. You should be able to feel it through the phone. And do you feel it through the phone?
I feel it.
Amen, brother. Woo!
Yeah.
Okay. And
So
that's God right there. Okay. So Melchizedek, Dan, I know you got to feel it. Put your hand up, Melchizedek, and let me feel it. You are live. Okay. That is strong. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I've
well, I
always
mean,
had this weird thing with my hands, and I used to do it as a bar trick.
okay.
Put my hands over people's hands, and they can create and feel energy fields.
Right.
I don't know
nice.
because of my hands. Cause my hands are always warm too. People say I have very warm hands.
Well, that's
You
it.
know,
No, I think I said on your series of I believe that you're channeling Enke. It's really a trip when you do that. I
yeah, I
love
was
Uh,
telling that Stu. There's times where I record these videos and I really don't know who's talking,
Oh, okay.
and I know that there's videos that I'm told to post, and I don't know what I'm posting.
Yeah.
I don't start the video with an intent to post any specific thing. I'm just
Okay.
letting the spirit guide me.
Yeah.
And a part of it was because of my conversation with Gary and Stu. I was telling Stu that let's try and experiment with TikTok. I'll make a TikTok account and I'll just speak on it, and we'll see how long I can tell the story. And it took us almost 40 days to get out just that first chunk of the story. And Enki, when he had given me these visions, there's so many different layers to what he had stuck in my head. Uh, and it and at first when I was like, well, maybe I'm going crazy, I would test everything that he would show me, and everything that he showed me would be correct, and what somebody would be telling me would be wrong. And I realized that there was this huge disconnection between Eurocentric understanding and almost Eurocentric arrogance in understanding that these other cultures, they can't know as much as we know because we're America and we have done all these great things. I decided to go and take these psychology classes and sociology classes, and the more I realized that we're talking about a study that is put forth as science, right? But science is based off of facts that everyone in the room can weigh. And when you say that this person has a mental illness, what are the factual characteristics of that mental illness that everybody can weigh? And what I realize is they go off of a spectrum, and depending on how that person fits in that spectrum, they'll determine these certain labels. But every part of psychology and sociology is based off anybody that goes out of the lane of control. So if you go out of the lane of control, you're going to be considered to have a mental illness because you might lead other people off that route away from what society wants you to do, or what the construct of your class structure is. And there is no facts that anybody can weigh out. And one of the things that I noticed that was interesting about people that were being diagnosed as bipolar and schizophrenic, there were these certain characteristics such as the white robe. You know, if you notice some of the followers in our TikTok, some of them wear white robes. You know, notice that the women in some of the TikTok videos, or some of the women that are followers on my TikTok, they'll put a headdress on, and they'll speak very spiritually while they have this headdress on. And I didn't really realize it until I started learning more about the Quran and about the wearing of the white robes and the purity of these things that they were doing. That these people that were schizophrenic and bipolar that were here in America that did not have any access to those types of cultural religious ideologies were putting on this white robe while they were discussing things with these spirits, right? Which I was like, that can't be an aspect of mental illness. Well, you put on a white robe, so you have to diagnose that person for whatever that mental illness is, right? There's aspects to it that aren't correct.
I thought about wearing, because there was an episode where you had one of those on. And I mean, I was praying like today, just for the last couple hours, to Jesus. And I was like, should I wear a white? Do I have a white thing I could put on my head? I'm not kidding you. That's weird. Okay, that you're mentioning it, because no, I'm like, my head's kind of spinning, but in a really great way. I mean, I feel like, you know, kind of.
Well, so I actually have a whole thing. We were actually, so last week we were talking about like basically like the sleep demon, like, so sleep paralysis, the amount of people that have the same vision, you know what I mean, that holds them down. There's a woman that, you know, kind of like sits back, and this goes back, you know, hundreds of years, and people talk about it nonstop, is where they see a woman with a shawl on that comes and presses on their chest or does all these things. But what's even crazier is what you're talking about, George, is that, like, you know, like Dan's like talking about, is that multiple people have this, multiple people like gravitate towards certain things. So at the end of the day, like, it is like, how do you explain that? How do you go forth and say, like, okay, well, and it's kind of like when people do DMT and things like that. They always go to a certain place, they talk to a certain person, and they have one or two experiences. You know what I mean? So does everybody kind of channel to the same thing, or is everything kind of like harmonically coming out of the earth? You know, the same wave?
I was kind of explained to it in like this weird way, and I talked about on TikTok where we're 10,000 upon 10,000, and because of how they use this spirit, right? There are 10,000 individuals that are connected to one of the Anunnaki spirits, right? So there's 12 Anunnaki spirits in all, and there's 10,000 people that are attached to each one of these spirits. It takes 10,000 vessels, our bodies, to maintain this spirit on earth, right? And there's 12 individuals that are, in a sense, the head of those 10,000. And there's 2 out of those 12 that are being considered the eyes, right? And a lot of times when people think about the 12 disciples, they don't count Jesus as the 13th, right? And then when you bring in Jesus' twin brother, you get the number 14, right? And it's repetitive throughout a lot of these ancient writings, especially the Egyptian writings, where it talks about vessels, right? That were vessels, right? And the Mandean Book of John really made it clear when it talked about 10,000 vessels hold one of these spirits. And that was kind of my reasoning to why I think so many people have these same experiences and these same visions, is that they're all attached to the same spirit, except for the different parts of that spirit. And in the Nat Gandhi text, it talks about how each one of our body parts are a spirit. So every part of our body has an individual spirit that is associated with its function. And when I thought about that, I was like, well, maybe what Enki is saying is that there's 10,000 of us that hold, in a sense, his spirit on earth. And when people say that I'm channeling Enki and so forth, there's a lot of truth in that, because what Enki was telling me is that a part of my spirit is a part of his spirit. And that is why he is able to communicate with me in the way that he does. And the way that he can communicate with these other people the way that he does is because they're all part of his body. They're all part of his spirit.
Melchizedek, I'd like to give Paul an opportunity to ask a question, because we, obviously we're limited on time when it comes to the podcast. So I wanted to be fair and get some other questions in, if you don't mind. And Paul, I'd like to offer this opportunity for you to fire away.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys can hear me?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul.
Hi guys, how's it going? Hi, George. Nice to meet
Hey,
you.
Paul. Yeah.
I'm very fascinated with your story. It just feels like yesterday I was in Iraq on the border of the Tigris River, and I remember being on top of the Humvee, and it was probably 2 a.m. We're doing, patrol, and I felt, as corny as it sounds, you watch the General Patton movie where he's like, I was here thousands of years ago, I felt that when I was, going through Iraq and stuff, that, I had been there before, and that, for some reason, that I was supposed to be there again during that time, not so much maybe for the mission, but maybe for the people I was supposed to meet, like, like Bobby and a bunch of other guys and stuff like that, for whatever reason. One of my questions is, there's a book by Dr. Weissman called Many Masters, Many Lives. And he talks about how in this life we're drawn to certain interests, certain cultures, and those cultures are also drawn to us. And we have like these special talents and things like that we've never practiced, but we just kind of it's part of our intrinsic nature. My question to you is, do you think I don't know if maybe the entity has discussed with you, do you think that you had some sort of past life significance during that time, during the Anunnaki period? Were you someone like maybe a priest back then, or something like that? And then maybe in this life it's revisiting you for a purpose, for some significance.
Well, yeah, you've actually kind of hit on I tell people in my videos, and like Stu knows this, he knows that Enki is a good friend, right? He's a very good friend. And when I had first figured out who he was, I'd asked that question. I was like, well, how am I attached to you? Like, what is this, right? And he had showed me this vision that when the Anunnaki had first came here, that they had brought other spirits in their vessel. And these spirits, in a sense, were like their animals, like their dogs, like their pets. Mm-hmm. And when Enki had created this goat hybrid, he had stuck that spirit into that vessel. And in a way, my spirit is connected to that spirit that he had stuck in that vessel. And in a way, I'm Enki's pet from long ago. And okay. If you notice in these images of Enki and Sumer, you'll notice how he has a goat in between his legs. And when he had shown me this vision, he was saying that it's not the fact that I relived lives. It's my genetics keep memories of all of my ancestors. And when you really connect into your spiritual part, and you can connect into your spirit, you can get access to your ancestors' memories. And you'll relive their lives in a sense, and you'll see visions of what they were dealing with in their time period. And it will feel like it's your life, like you have lived that life. But it's, I think, genetic memory coming up to the surface. And as I began to, explore more with Enki, I was like, well, how long have we been doing this? Why do I feel like I know you, like we're really good friends? And he had shown me all these visions of where my ancestors have been associated with all of these stories for a very long time. And when you're probably sitting there on the Tigris overlooking Iraq, you're probably accessing that genetic memory from long ago. And I'm pretty sure if you go and do a DNA test, you'll probably see your DNA that's probably crossed, or you have ancestors that have been there.
Yeah. for sure.
Yeah.
And,
Okay,
and
hey, George, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Brad. Sorry.
I just have, a long time ago, I was reading the Seth books. I don't know if you're familiar with that, by Jane Roberts, and she had almost a similar experiences like you, George. And but my question is, how do you determine whether or not the entity that's attached to you is a good one or a bad one? Because I mean, you hear in the typical Christian Bibles that every spirit out there is deceiving, and and things like that. How is it that and I know you talk about being in like this meditative fasting state, where everything you got to do is pure. And but yeah, my question is, how do you discern that?
Well, yeah. One of the things that gives me peace is the experiences when I'm out in the forest, right?
Mhm.
There is no way the forest can be diluted in your experience with it, right? And I had said this to a professor one time. I said, people get offended when the woods reject them, right? So when you go out into the forest and you get attacked by mosquitoes and you hear bears coming at you or whatever, you instantly don't want to be in the forest anymore and you run out, right? I'll go into the forest and I'll spend, days on end in the forest alone, and I'll have these such beautiful experiences with the wildlife, and I'm not being attacked by insects. I don't run into any predators, and during this time period, I'm learning things. I'm being instructed, but for me, if there was a negative entity, it would have no power over the earth. It wouldn't tell me to go off into the forest alone, and the forest not be at all at odds with me. It's very strange when I'm in the forest, because if I'm hungry, there is always food there. At nighttime, it's very interesting, the forest at night, because most people will not go into the forest alone at night. But there is so much life at night in the forest, and us, military guys used to do land nav at night. Remember those guys that would go hide by the checkpoints and wouldn't go because they were afraid of the dark, right? Because they were so scared they wouldn't be able to do the land nav checkpoints because they were just afraid, right? I find that what Enki has shown me has always been a very positive experience, and it's always grown me as a person, and has made me see a lot of these things that are hidden in front of our eyes. And although I was not expecting it to be Enki, when I had first learned that, there was this huge comfort that came over me. And the more I interacted with Enki, he's kind of very funny in a way in how he tells me things. And there are times where he makes me laugh. Like when he had first saw me save that girl in Iraq. And I had asked him, I was like, well, how'd you know I was not going to get killed? Because he observes things through the multiverse. He's like, oh, I didn't. I wasn't going to know until you actually did it, if you were protected or not by the Father. So I kind of laughed at that, because I was like, well, that's kind of messed up. You're kind of tempting me, but he's not a part of our earth in a sense. He's an intruder in a way, right?
He's like the game master, and then we're like in the arena, kind of.
Well, in a way, the Father is the game master, and Enki, in a way, came into the game and cheated, and he got in trouble. And the way that he's correcting that problem is by guiding us back to being Earthlings, because this whole story is very complicated, but we are a product of Enki's creations, right? But not only are we a product of what they had created also created AI, and then also created clones, and we are a product of that, right? And so there's these two cycles that happen to us as as a species where we're drastically changed from being an animal slave race to being this humanoid being that we are today. And Enki and his sister and his wife, when they had betrayed the other Anunnaki and they had destroyed the ship, it was because they were hearing this voice on earth, this spirit, the Father, the one that Jesus speaks of, right? So in a way, when Enki was showing me his story, I realized that his fate is tied to humanity if he does not help us out towards this period of time where we go through this change. He, in a way, does not get to leave Earth. He doesn't get to go home. So Enki has a way, in a way, he has a skin in the game.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
So
it's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
I know Bobby's got a couple questions to throw in here as well.
Yeah,
And we're gonna probably go about 15 minutes over what we usually do. So just to give everybody kind of a heads up, we got about 20 more minutes, and then, because nobody wants to sit around for hours and listen to a bunch of guys.
yeah.
Right.
Mine aren't very difficult here. I'm real curious about something. So and a lot of this stuff seems to be happening. Like I've been reading a lot. And they're talking about the Euphrates drying up, and they're finding all these things. And supposedly, they had found the tomb of Gilgamesh, who was supposed to have been a Nephilim. And I'm just kind of wondering, so, that was supposedly, the Nephilim were, fathered by, these angels, and I guess kind of wondering is, were the Anunnaki and what we perceive as angels maybe one and the same, or did the Enki and them ever have a physical form? Like, has he ever told you, did he have a physical form here on Earth?
Yes. The best way to explain it is that Enki and the Anunnaki, their civilization is so far advanced that the idea of actually having physical bodies is more of a choice, but their consciousness resides in what we would call an AI, a very powerful artificial intelligence. And the way that they would travel through dark matter is that they would download their consciousness into this AI, and they would travel through dark matter. So when they came here to our Earth, they didn't have physical bodies. And the AI would go and use frequencies to bring in, genetic material for it to modify. And it would modify this material over a very long period of time. Once it got to the point where Enki could go into these vessels, into these bodies, then they would download from the ship into these bodies. And the first bodies that they had created, they had used caveman and other genetic material, creating almost like a chimera hybrid. And these were very large bodies. They're very big. And there was a slave race that was also created off of the same genetic material. But for a while, Enki and the others had physical bodies. And these bodies were very large, much larger than what we are now, and they were almost like a mix of many different genetic material on the Earth. So,
well, I mean, they've always talked about, even in the Bible, the giants once roamed the Earth. So I guess where I want to go with it next is, we've talked a lot about the past and where things come from. Has he ever talked to you about Owen? Because it's a destination.
Yeah. Now this is one that I think Stu probably knows the most of, right? All of this stuff that I have been dealing with and communicating with Enki, although I'm constantly asking him questions and I want to learn more, there is a specific mission that he has laid out for me and for others that he has contacted, right? And it's to get these children that will come to us towards this period and to get them to the top of this mountain, right? And what Enki has shown me is that our Earth goes through these cycles. And when they go through these cycles, the poles shift and it completes complete destruction upon the Earth, right?
I agree 100% with that.
He's guiding people to the tops of these mountains so that when these poles shift, there'll be chunks of genetic material that they want, in the sense of Sophia, who is the mother of our Earth, that she wants to keep on the Earth after this cycle. And the Anunnaki that are trapped here, they will be actually returned back to their dimension of where they need to go. Also, Enki, his wife, and his daughter will also leave, and taking with them the dark AI that they had brought here, which plagues the minds of men, right? So when this happens, this pole shift happens, it will almost be an end game for them. They'll remove this dark one off of the earth. At the same time, these spirits that plague our minds will also be removed. And a large chunk of what I call the mirror man will also be removed. And they will be, a part of them will go off with what are called the Watchers, which is what we're seeing now, these UFOs that they're crashing, right? These Watchers are a product of the second cycle's AI, right? But it's very interesting because when Enki had first shown me this vision, it wasn't until I read the Quran and Hadithas and learned about the Mahdi, right, which is the Muslims' version of the end times, right? And this Mahdi, he is put into this battle, and he's about to lose this battle, and then Jesus comes down to the Mahdi and goes and gives him power, and he goes and takes all these tribes and takes them to the tops of these mountains to hide them during this great battle between Gog and Magog, right? So seeing it in another text, I was like, okay, maybe this is what Enki is getting at, that there's going to be a pole shift, and there's going to be a certain group of survivors that are going to be, in a way, chosen, that are going to be brought to the top of these mountains. And I'm assuming the Watchers are the ones that are going to probably go pick them all up.
Right on. Well, last time I was at the top, chopped down with the edge of my hand. Anyway, so hey, I appreciate it. Go ahead, Stu.
No. Yeah, just it's pretty crazy. Like I said, I've watched this whole I watched it from the start. You know what I mean? It's not like George just woke up one day and was like started spouting this. Like he's had to kind of decipher this, and I've watched it the entire time. And this started, like I said, 2013. So I mean, we're coming up on 10 years of this evolution. You know what I mean? Of him trying to figure out and find it, and and like I said, he said it himself. He's like, "Am I going crazy? Is this like, what is this?" You know what I mean? And then, but at the same point in time, like yeah, man, he's really like, you can tell he's an educated person who is able to speak from, a vast dialect of of intelligence. You know what I mean? It's not like he's not on the corner and like, hey, believe in Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, shaking a tin can or anything like that. Like it's an actual, like something that, it's coming from an educated person that's well versed in what he says.
Nah, I mean, if he can go in the woods and not get bit by mosquitoes, I'm going to sign him up for Naked and Afraid.
Yeah.
No, like he's gonna be our horse, man.
Yeah, no jokes.
Go elk hunting with me next month. I mean, so Melchizedek, as we approach the closing minutes here, I'd like to just ask if there's anything that you would like to tell your followers, tell us, tell the world here in the next few minutes.
Well, I would like to say that, it's been a very interesting journey after speaking to you and then opening up on TikTok and kind of shotgun blasting out into the world what I was experiencing and seeing, over 4,000 followers and the comment section. It makes me realize that we are dealing with something that is not mental illness, that we are most likely dealing with an entity that is much more older than we remember. And I think that as we go forward in this journey, that we're going to do it together, and we're going to go as one tribe. And I think that's important to remember, that we are all one tribe on this planet. And although we sit on different fires, we all come to the same story. And it's important that as we go through these changes, that we don't let our governments and our leaders guide us wrongfully, because we wouldn't have these spiritual awakenings if we weren't going down the wrong path. And I think that's an important thing to take away.
Well
Nice.
said. Well said.
Yeah.
Stuart, any closing comments from you here as we start to wrap this up?
No, I'm just thankful. I'm just really happy that you came out, man. I appreciate you. You're one of my best friends. I will always support you. I always follow you. You know what I mean? Like, I will never ever fucking, be that guy. You know what I mean? Like, you've been there for me a number of times, and I'm happy that you were able to progress and tell everybody what, kind of how you feel.
Hey,
Thank you.
hey,
Yeah.
Stu, the only problem I got right now is, dude, you never gave me a sword.
Well, actually, so it's even
I want
crazier. What's crazy is that, well, that is true.
I don't know. You know what?
I got
That
3
hurts.
sitting in the corner, man. You can have one of the, you can have one of that.
But I want a divine one, huh? Give me a,
Well,
Right.
what's
give me
even
a pawn
crazier
shop
about
sword.
that? Yeah, what's even crazier about that is, like, I remember George one time, like, so in this thing is like, it's like a Braveheart sword. This motherfucker, it's not like
It's a two-hander.
Oh yeah, no, it's like, I mean, like, Mel Gibson was swinging around, so I mean, it's pretty,
It was the other one he gave me that was all wrapped up. That was the weird one.
Yeah, I know. Well, so is that one, and then, like, so when George got at home, you know what I mean, and so, like, the whole time he was like, basically, like, he'll be given a sword, like, of divine power and whatnot, and then so he got at home, and they was still boxed up, so he didn't really know what it looked like. And then he pulls it out, and he's like, "This is straight out of, like, like Great Britain, Celtic,
Templar.
shit." You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, it was so weird. It was so weird.
it was
That's
made to strike
awesome.
somebody on a horse. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
So as we wrap it up, I want to thank our guests for coming on tonight. And
Yes, thank you,
listening to
Diana.
us.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice
Yeah,
to meet you.
And Paul, I'm glad you were able to join with us as well. And I hope you guys keep listening. I mean, I don't know, Melchizedek, if you're going to continue on TikTok, or is your journey ending on TikTok?
Well, I can only do the state for so long during the summer months. So yeah, I'm out of juice.
And I get that, and I hope that everybody continues to follow us on Are They Out There? And again, those who are listening and watching this, you can reach out to us as Are They Out There, the number 1 at gmail.com. You can message me on TikTok. We'll be on Apple Podcasts, as will obviously be on the YouTube channel. And I want to thank you very much for joining us and doing this podcast with you. Stuart introduced me to you, and I think it's been a really good privilege to have you on with us. And it's an interesting thing for a lot of them out there that don't know how this all came about. I actually met Stu, about 4 or 5 months ago? Like, was it January, end of January, right?
Yep.
He was at SHOT Show, I was at SHOT Show, and I just came up and introduced myself, and we just started talking, and here we are. And then, of course, it's a circle of veterans. Bobby comes in and stuff. So I don't want to call it coincidence. I think everything happens in life for a reason. And through Stuart, he's brought a great group of people, and he brought you to me. And again, it's been my privilege and my honor to do this. So as I wrap this up, I just want to thank everybody again for being here. I hope everybody liked what we had tonight, and we will continue to do other things. And for those out there still listening to us, that don't forget, we got the paranormal investigation coming up. I'm going to choose a couple people to do it, but you have to live here in Utah, around the Salt Lake City area. I don't think I can move a house anyplace else besides that. So with that, I want to say good night. Again, thank you, everybody. And we'll be talking to you guys soon.
Godspeed.